Imagine buying your dream home only to discover that something dark and sinister is within the walls, and it's waiting for you. Welcome to Truth Be Told Paranormal, where we explore the unknown, the unexplained, and everything that lies beyond the veil. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and today we're diving into a chilling story that will make your spine tingle and your heart race. In October of 1988, Bob Cranmer bought what he thought was his dream home in a quiet Pittsburgh suburb of Brentwood. Little did he know that very house, 3406 Brownsville Road, would turn into his family's worst nightmare. What started as small, eerie occurrences quickly escalated into a full-blown demonic haunting. The Cranmers faced violent supernatural attacks, ghostly apparitions, and even walls that bled. Today we have Bob Cranmer himself joining us to recount the terrifying events that plagued his family and the epic battle of faith he waged to reclaim his home from this evil entity. This is not a ghost story. It's a tale of resilience, faith, and unseen war between good and evil. So buckle up, because this is one haunting you won't forget. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, Bob Cranmer. There he is, the man, the myth. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine, boy. That's a pretty epic introduction you had there.
And he only works at McDonald's. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm impressed.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. Like I said, almost 1,000 episodes. I still get excited when we talk about people that have experienced, from possessions to demonic entities to even just ghost stories, especially since, the beginning of Halloween season. So it's an honor to have you here and to talk about your book and about, how this all affected you and your family. So, I want to go back before you even decided to purchase this home. Where did you grow up, and what was your experiences in the belief of spirituality or, spirits from the other side? Or, when you used to watch, when I was a kid, we used to watch these ghost stories, on television and on movies, and that would scare the bejesus out of us. So let's take us back as a childhood, and what was your thoughts on, the paranormal, I guess we could say.
Okay, to answer your first question, I grew up right here in Brentwood, where I currently reside. I've basically spent my life here, except for 10 years in the military. I was gone, but so I grew up right on these same streets I live on today. As far as my experience with ghosts or the paranormal, I really didn't have any. My parents bought a country house when I was not even a teenager, and I can remember there was an older couple that had owned it prior to us, and the wife died, and it was an old German couple, and the husband sold the house and moved out because he was by himself. And the woman was meticulous about this old house she had. I mean, it was just perfect. They basically lived in the basement.
Oh, wow.
And me and my two brothers, we move in, and it's our weekend getaway house,
Right.
And before you know it, we're banging around. Anyway, I get to the point that my brother claimed to have seen a ghost one night, and we always joked that it was the wife upset that we were destroying her house.
How dare you?
Other than that, I had no interest. Sure, I saw movies, different spooky movies and so on, like all kids.
Like all of us, yeah.
I remember the one movie I do remember when I was it's back in the 60s. It was a movie called The Haunting. And that affected me. And it was kind of odd because that kind of was the same type of story that I would end up living in this house. But other than that, again, I saw the movie The Exorcist and so on, but I had no real interest in in ghost stories or ghost hunting or ghost anything, and nor did I ever have any encounters with any, spirits or even suspected activity like that.
So I've been in homes. Like I said, I grew up in a home that I still think that I saw a ghost, an old man in the house I grew up in. But then I've been in homes where you have no feelings at all. Like, you just like, oh, it's a home or somebody's house. But then you go into certain homes, you get this creepy feeling. You get the hairs that stand on the back of your neck. And so I'm going to jump forward to the 80s when you purchased the house on Brownsville Road. And you mentioned a strange connection by looking back. Do you think there was an attraction, or this attraction was like a coincidence, or do you believe something more sinister was drawing you to this particular home? So,
well, I don't even know if it was in fact sinister. I mean, as time has gone by since all of this occurred, and it's not quite 20 years since it concluded.
Wow.
It concluded in 2006. I've had a lot of time to reflect upon what happened and how it happened. And I really do believe, understanding now that, I ended up writing a book about it, which I certainly didn't intend to do when it was going on or anything. I didn't have some grand plan that I was going to experience this and write a spooky book. I was just dealing with it and at the time, just keeping basically a diary of what was taking place every day.
That's amazing you did that, though. That's really great.
Well, yeah, I was recommended. In fact, the mayor at the time, I was good friends with the mayor of Pittsburgh. I had been a county commissioner in Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is, and he and I were friends, and we did some big projects together, built sports stadiums and so on, and we were friends close enough that I could tell him what was going on. In fact, he's the one who helped me connect with the Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh, and they eventually got involved. But he told me, listen, you need to be keeping a record of all this. Now, at the time, I had no idea we were entering into like a 2-year battle, which at one time seemed like it wasn't ever going to end.
I bet.
I thought the priests would come in with their hats and their rosary beads and their can with incense in it, dominoes and biscuits and so on, and they would do their thing and leave and it would be over. I had no idea it was going to be as serious as it was. So when I started taking notes, I thought this was going to be like a 3-week deal and it would be done. No, it was like the rest of my life. It impacted me. And so I did, I kept notes, copious notes, because I knew what we were experiencing was really significant, and I had to have a record.
When you first walked into the home, when you were looking at purchasing a home somewhere, was there any type of feelings, or was it just more like I walked into an older home like any other that you walked into before?
Well, I had no particular ominous feelings. My wife, after the first visit, did, because of what took place during that visit with my one of my sons, which I can get into in a minute.
Yeah.
I didn't have. I know what you're saying about when you go into an older house, and haunted houses are relatively common. A family lives in a house for 40 years and so on, and you can still feel. When you go into a house like that, if a family had been in it for so long, you can still feel all that,
right.
Whether it's a haunting or not. But when I came into this house, I'll never forget. It was like walking into the bowels of a ocean liner. It was just kind of so overwhelming because it was so big and so impressive. And I was just somewhat in awe because I was doing what I wanted to do from the time I was in grade school,
right.
and that was go in this house and see what it looked like. And it just turned out that when that time finally came and I got that opportunity, I was looking at the house to buy it. And again, to answer another one of your questions, I do believe that my attraction to the house, the whole scenario where we moved back to Pittsburgh without any intention of living in this community, and this house goes up for sale the same week we moved back here. I think that was not coincidence. I think it was part of a larger plan. I think the whole situation of my being involved in this battle that took place, I think even my personality was shaped to an extent to prepare me for it. And in the end, I wrote a book, 10 years ago, and I'm being interviewed about that book to this day. And probably 10 years from now, I'll be interviewed about it, because it's a very, very unique story.
Yeah.
And I think it was part of a much larger plan, because it's not just a scary book. It's just not a haunted. It is about the true existence of God and the devil and evil in the world and good in the world and Jesus and the whole thing. It's all true.
Right.
It's all true.
Well, let me ask you this, because, when you're buying a home from a previous owner, they're not going to always tell you the sump pump's not working well. They're not going to tell you there's a leak up in the attic that's, you're going to have to fix later down the road. Did you have an opportunity to speak with the owners that were selling it? And did they mention of any signs of what you went through?
Well, I mean, sure. And that's, in the first chapters of the book, I describe our encounters. And, you walk into this house, it's like buying an apartment building. At the time, the house was 80 years old or so. Right. It's 115 years old now, but still a big, big place. He was good at describing to me what he had done and what needed to be done. And I knew what I was getting into. I knew I was buying a house with about 50 windows that had to be replaced and a furnace that looked like a nuclear reactor that was going to have to be replaced. And I wasn't sure about the roof and all that stuff. But the real question, is there anything wrong with this house? Now, that came on our second visit. Because during our first visit, my wife experienced somewhat of a harrowing encounter.
I want to hear this.
with my 3-year-old son at the time. We were touring the house. We had 2 of our children with us, our 4-year-old daughter and 3-year-old son. We were with the owners, and we were in the basement looking at that large nuclear reactor furnace. And my wife looked around and asked where Bobby Jr. was, the son, and our daughter shrugged her shoulders and said, I think he's upstairs. And this house is so big, it's not like you can just call upstairs and say, hey, or where you at? So My wife and the lady of the house headed up to find him. So they went up through the kitchen, the dining room, and went into the foyer, which is a large room where there's a big grand staircase that goes up to a balcony on the second floor. And halfway up is a landing. And they saw him on the landing standing there shivering and somewhat gasping for air. And the lady rushed forward and embraced him and said, oh, honey, did you see something?
Oh, no.
So my wife, yeah, here you go. You got a good picture of it right there.
There you go.
My wife observes this and says to herself, what do you mean? Did you see something? So after we were there, she obviously said to me, hey, she told me what happened. And she said, this place gives me the creeps. I'm telling you, I don't like it. I don't like it. You know, it's like we're walking into something I don't like, and we don't need a house this big at all. And I was just so enthralled and so just mesmerized and just taken aback by, I'm a history guy.
Right, same here.
And, you know, at the time, I'm 30 years old and I have grandiose plans for my life about, you know, different things I was going to do, which I ended up doing. But nonetheless, this house kind of fit that feeling of being special, you know?
Right.
So I said, no, this is our house. We're buying this house. There's no problems with it. So I was set for it. And she was uneasy about it, and she was right. So to answer your question,
did she remind
after that, I said to the man, the guy, I was in the kitchen. His name he went by Seamus. It was an Irish couple, Jim. And I said, Jim, is there anything wrong with this house? And you would think he'd say, well, define wrong. You know, I've showed you the furnace. No, he didn't say any of that. He said, no, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, we've had mass in the living room twice.
Well, yeah.
So one, he knew exactly what I was talking about without my having to explain it.
Right.
And two, who has mass in their living room? You know, if you're a Catholic, you know, mass isn't like taking on the road.
Right, right.
Or sometimes during war, they'll have it outside, but it's not something, hey, let's go over to your house and have mass. No, that doesn't happen. And he said, in fact, my youngest son had his first communion right there in the living room. And nobody has first communion in their living room. So he knew. And what happened, they had mass several times in the living room as part of their own attempt to deal with the spirits in the house. Because this was late November, early December, or late November. That next spring, after we had purchased the house, I was in the front yard. And mind you, during that time, we had already begun to experience paranormal encounters or activity, I should say. Not malevolent, but not, you know, just curiosity type events. So I'm in the front yard planting flowers, and my shovel digs up a little metal box that I could hold in my hand, kind of the size of a Sucrets box, the old throat lozenges. And I open it up, and inside it are like scapulars. I don't know if it was rosary beads, Catholic holy objects. So I go right in and I call him on the phone. I said, hey, Jim, because I knew he knew. I said, what's the deal? What's this box about? It's not old. It's obviously just been there. You know, the box wasn't corroded or anything. Right. And he was quiet. He said, please just put it back where you found it. Put it back. Now, later on, I would discover that's one Catholic ritual where when there's a problem with a house, they will bless the entire property and bury a holy object at each corner of the lot or the property. So that's what they had done. And I'm sure they did many other things, but it didn't work.
I was going to say, did you put it back?
It's time to get out of Dodge, yeah.
Did you put it back in the ground?
They sell it to a young couple that have 4 little kids.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Right.
I said, did you put that back in the ground?
I did.
Okay.
I did. And I'm sure it's still there. A few years ago, I tried to find it again with a metal detector, but in the interim, right where it was, I had planted years ago a cherry tree, and I think the roots have covered it up. So,
well, how long were you in the home before you started noticing things? And did the the demonic being or entity, was it gradually increasing of the
you'd have to read the book. Now, to answer your question, it was just a few weeks.
Wow.
Before we began to encounter, my wife and I knew there's something going on in this house. There's a ghost and there's a spirit in this house with us. Didn't see, I didn't know anything, how these things work. You hear of haunted hotels and haunted houses and haunted restaurants, and, they don't close. And I figured, okay, we'll deal with this thing. If we have to live with this, or, we have to get a priest here and, bless the house, we'll do what we need to do to take care of it. But I wasn't overly alarmed by it, even though it really freaks you out when all of a sudden you realize this isn't human. This is something spiritual. It confirms that it's not somebody's opinion or somebody's imagination.
Right.
It's not something that you can argue about anymore. You experience it. It's real. And once you understand that, it does put it in a different perspective. People say, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't care what you believe or not. I can tell you that ghosts exist, demons exist, spirits exist.
Right.
It isn't, you live, you love, and you die.
Right.
No. It goes on. There's this whole spiritual world around us it's kind of like the Matrix. There's a whole world around us we can't see.
Right.
So, let me tell you real quick about our first experience. So, underneath that big staircase, there is a closet that's large enough. It's a walk-in closet, big, deep closet. It's a storage closet, a code closet, and it has a light in it, an old Victorian light that has a Victorian shade on it with a pull chain. And you open the closet up. Initially, you really can't see in the closet unless you have a light, and so you reach where the light is. The light's about 6 feet off the floor. Grab for the pull chain, pull it, turn the light on. Simple enough. And this was, December, and I had my overcoat in that closet. And when I would go to work in the morning, I'd go and get my coat out of the closet. I'd open the door and I'd reach to turn on the light by pulling the chain. And I couldn't find the chain. The chain wouldn't be there. Now, again, my eyes hadn't adjusted, so I can't really see the light yet. It's underneath. You can see where the steps come down from the second floor. Right underneath there, that's the closet I'm talking about. So I reach for the chain and it's not there. So then finally, when my eyes adjust and I can see, and then I see that the chain is wrapped around the top of the light, or it would be wrapped around the little screws that hold in the shade of the crystal shade. And I would unwrap it. So that happened, I'd say, 3 times. And I said to my wife, hey, she kept mainly the vacuum cleaner in that closet. So I said, honey, when you turn the light off in that closet, please don't just pull the chain. What's happening? It's
She's
flying
like,
up over the light, and it's aggravating. And she said, well, first of all, I don't pull the chain like that. I don't let it fly. And 2, I haven't even been in that closet for a couple of days. You haven't? No. So no one else is in the house but the kids. Each of the kids come up probably to the doorknob on the door. So they're not reaching up and doing anything. We're a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, and a newborn. So I get the coat. I say, okay, you see the chain hanging. I see it's hanging. I'm turning the light out. Don't go in this closet the rest of the day. Simple enough. I come home that night. She greets me at the door. We walk to the closet, open the door, chains wrapped around the light. With that experience, we knew right then, okay, there's something going on in this house. I ended up finally just taking a piece of wire, tying it to the chain, and then tying it to, there were little coat hooks along the wall, tying it to a coat hook to keep it in place. And then after that, other things would happen. We'd come down in the morning and all the lights would be on the first floor of the house.
Oh, wow.
I mean, all the lights. Things in the basement. There was always a chair in the basement. I had a work room where the furnace was, and I had a chair in the room. I'd come down in the morning, the radio would be on, and the chair would be facing the furnace. Always, I'd move it back. I just kind of got used to it. So as the years went on, we just got used to living with a ghost. But as we would later find out in years to come, as it became much more ominous, it began to really screw with us mentally.
Mm-hmm, I'm sure.
And then physically. And then it unmasked itself for what it was, and I had to go to the church because it was clearly a who you're going to call moment.
Right.
And really, who was I going to call?
Yeah. Right.
It just was it was
so
harrowing.
How long was that? Because, like I said, I grew up in a house that was haunted. We used to hear the walking and the doors closing. I even had a painting come off the wall towards me, but I didn't feel threatened at all. And that was all my life, and it never really got worse. So I've worked with a lot of people in the psychic world, and they say there's a big difference between a haunting, such as a ghost of spirit, just don't want to leave. They love their home, versus a demonic spirit.
Oh, yeah. There's, a ghost is the spirit, generally, as I understand, the ghost is the spirit of a person who once lived. For some reason, they're tied to a specific location or a specific event location, and they're there, who knows, for how long. Maybe it's the Catholic doctrine of purgatory. Mm-hmm. They have to atone to go through something. I don't know, but they're not, usually not, unless they were dangerous people when they were alive, like murderers and killers. Then I guess ghosts can be scary, dangerous people. But a demon, as I've learned, demons can possess, it's very rare, but a demon, like in the movie The Exorcist, can possess a person. They can possess an object, and they can possess a location. A location of a plot of land or a house on a plot of land. And when you're dealing with one of these things, literally, once you know what you're in for, you're involved with, it's like you're dealing with the invisible man. You're dealing with something that's up close and personal and interactive with you. It's just not some ghost that's repeating some activity that's kind of oblivious to you, and it's walking down the hallway and doing something, and you just kind of see it or observe it. This thing, I would talk to it. I would have conversations with it. It was a daily thing. I lived with this, and it went on, and kind of at one point just about drove us crazy. But that's the story.
Yeah,
that's the book.
And I think a lot of times, especially in these type of stories, in fact, I can't remember the Netflix that just came out. It was talking about that one house in like Chicago or somewhere. I can't remember, but
the one in Indiana.
Yeah, in Indiana. Yeah. But it's always seems to like attach itself quickly to the children because they're more innocent and they're more open to seeing things that adults don't have the ability to see. Was there one particular of your children that was being attached to first?
Yes, exactly. And just it's funny. And I think this wasn't an accident either. The day we moved in the house, and the moving truck drove away, and it was a big, kind of a big day for us. And
yeah, I'm sure
it was early December, so I took a camera. It's before cell phones and so on. I took a camera, I said, I'm going to go outside and take a picture of the house. So I had the camera, put my coat on, walked out up around the hedges. And apparently after I left, my son saw that I had gone outside. He was 3 years old. He's the same kid that was on the steps, on the staircase. And he said to my wife, I want to go outside with Daddy. So she bundled him all up and put his coat on. And I was already outside set to take the picture as he walks out the door looking for me. And he walks out the door and I say, Bobby, stop right where you're at. And I took a picture, and that's the picture that's on the front of the book. And he's the one who really was most affected. My wife was really affected, but it really targeted him specifically. That's the picture right there. And he was just coming out to see me, and the house looks like it's ready to swallow him.
Well, why do you personally feel that it attached to him the most or first?
I don't know. There was one particular room, which I later find out after the fact that the two owners before us wouldn't use as a bedroom. Oh. Because it had such a bad feeling to it. Mm-hmm. And we made it Bobby's bedroom unknowingly. And as we would later find out all the different things that happened on this property and in this house, one of the things that took place, and we can surmise it happened in the 1920s, possibly into the 1930s even. It was during the Depression, and the owners, I suppose, who were older and fell on the hard times and wanted to keep the house and needed money, rented that bedroom out to a pediatrician who ran an illegal practice of performing abortions.
Right.
And he needed a discreet place where people could come and go discreetly. And this house was like, because you could drive around the back of the house and park and come into the back of the house. And he used that bedroom for I don't know how many years as his practice for his abortion.
Wow.
Practice, his activity, and whatever someone's opinion is on it, it's still death and destruction, and it went on and was concentrated in that house for years. And that's the room that we put our 3-year-old son in. And for the first year, he refused to sleep in the bed. He didn't tell us why. He would sleep in the closet with the light on.
He felt safer in there.
He would sleep in the closet. We eventually, after about a week, we got a mattress that came out of a crib and put it on the floor, and that's where he would sleep. We refused to sleep in his bed.
Wow.
So another interesting story, after we had been in the house about a month or so and had experienced this paranormal activity, my mother, I was raised Catholic, became an evangelical Christian, so I wasn't Catholic at the time. And I asked my mother, hey, we'd really like to have the house blessed by a priest. Do you think you could arrange one of the parish priests to come to the house and bless it? And she says, oh, yeah, Father Victor, he's a priest from India. I'm friends with him. He'd be a real nice guy. And he came one Saturday afternoon to bless the house, and it was it's a family event, and they say prayers and so on. So we started on the second floor, going to each room, and he had a vessel of holy water, and he was blessing, with holy water.
Did that piss somebody off?
Walks down the hall to Bobby's room. Now, he's 3 years old. Doors closed. The priest, we're all happy. This is nice. Hey, there's a priest here.
Right.
All this stuff. What's he doing? Yeah. Bobby, he's not into it. Remember, he stands in front of the door, places himself in the form of an X with his hands on the door frame, and says, you can't come in this room. What? Like, what's going on here? You're 3 years old.
Right.
It's like the men. You're not allowed to come in this room. I go to grab him, like, get out of here. What are you talking about? And the priest says, oh, don't worry about it. He doesn't understand what's happening. And he threw the holy water on the door. No, there was something going on there. There was something going on. Later, I found out that people wouldn't use that room as a bedroom. They weren't sure why. There was this weird little door knocker on the door. Now, why is there a door knocker on a bedroom door?
Right.
And it was placed there because the assistant to the doctor used to
so he'd let him know
that to see if it was okay for him to come in if the doctor was done.
Wow. I'm gonna get back to this next question, but I have to ask this. Even a doctor doing abortions doesn't seem like it would create a demonic portal to open.
Good question.
Yeah.
Let me answer it.
Okay.
Good question. So I did more research. So I find out, legend has it, that there are 4 people buried in the front yard at the foot of this big several 100-year-old oak tree. And, I was a military intelligence officer.
Right.
I was trained to deal with facts, trained to deal with a lot of different facts that you put together to paint a picture with. That's how you're trained. You're just a fact gatherer, and you use that with knowledge to understand what the enemy is doing. So in this, I tried to gather as many facts as I could about what took place, why it took place. I hired a kind of a house detective who would do a history of a house, who would tell you when it was built, what builder built it, who people who had it built, what they did for a living, where they were from, everything. I didn't leave any rock unturned.
Right.
So there was a legend in the community that this giant oak tree in the front yard was special for some reason. Some said it was because George Washington, on his trip in 1784, Brownsville Road is the main road into Pittsburgh or to Fort Pitt. Pittsburgh grew up around an English fort called Fort Pitt. And it was the main road to the fort from all points south. So they said George Washington, after the Revolution came, he owned a lot of land around here and came up here to run squatters off his land. And he had camped there. But there was a Catholic, she was called an intuitive, that the diocese used during this whole time in battling the demon. And she could tell us history of things and history of the house and history of the people. And all this stuff, she never was in the house, but she could point out to me not only the layout out of the house, the layout of the room, she could tell me what color the wallpaper was, what the furniture was. And she was just an amazing, she did this project, I forget what it's called, where someone in their mind can go project themselves to a location or a house or a building.
Remoting.
Remote observing. They can go to places. So she told me this story about a mother and her three children, her daughters, who were killed in what is now the front yard by Indians on a raiding party. And they were killed and scalped. And the father was gone at the time. And he came home to find his slain family all killed. And he buried them right in the front, what became the front yard. Obviously, the house wasn't built. Right. It was in the late 1700s. So again, good military intelligence officer, I began to dig and do research. So I find, surprisingly, a letter in the archives of the U.S. War Department, which is now the Department of Defense, dated March, I think 9th, 1792, commander of Fort Pitt, to the Secretary of War. There was a big war insurrection going on at that point with Native Americans who say they had not signed the Treaty of Paris and that the land that was ceded to the new United States by Great Britain wasn't theirs to cede, and all the land beyond the Ohio River and the Monongahela River was Indian country, and there was a war going on about it because the United States was starting in the late 1780s to move the population over the Allegheny River or over the Allegheny Mountains into what is now Ohio, Western Ohio, and a war started. It was a really terrible war. The first battles, the United States militia really got mauled badly, and they had to reactivate Fort Pitt, which had been the English fort in Pittsburgh, and that was the frontier. That's where the Indians were being held at bay. So he writes in this letter, "Hey, we need more troops. We need more guns. We need, this isn't looking good. We need help. Send. And oh, by the way, this past week, it was reported that a mother and her three children were killed by the Indians at their home, some distance from the fort. The father, whose name was Deliverance Brown, wasn't there at the time, and came back to find his slain family."
Wow.
The exact story that Connie, the intuitive, told me, I found in this long lost letter dated 1792 in the archives of the War Department, which no one had probably seen since 1792.
Right.
And it was just a few sentences at the end of the letter. It told the exact story. So what I then did was I looked at, she said they're buried right at the oak tree because he planted that oak tree. It was a sapling to mark the grave. So I hired a company by the name of Ground Penetrating Radar. They deal with construction companies and so on to tell them what's buried, down so many feet to find pipes and different things like that. And I paid them to come and scan my yard. So they scanned the area in front of the tree, and they were able to say that there was an exact area that was large enough. They marked it. There you have the picture, the grave, and the images of 4 what appears to be horizontal bodies laying right next to each other, about 4 to 6 feet down, and that was the grave that Connie had told me of. And I can't help but think that some distance from the fort, we're exactly 6 miles from Fort Pitt, up Brownsville Road, which leads right to Fort Pitt, that's what he was writing about. The event Connie told me that took place in the front yard. Now, to answer your story is, I believe that, the Native Americans would they'd put their war paint on and do their dances and all that stuff, and they would pray to their spirit gods to give them courage and victory and so on, and to be ruthless in battle and kill the enemy. And they generally did not kill women and children. They would take them hostage. They only killed men. But in this case, they slaughtered a mother and 3 daughters in cold blood. And I believe that the spirit that was responsible for that death
stayed there.
Those children attached itself to the land. and that eventually, 100 and so years later, 120 years later, when the house was built, that spirit inhabited the house. And, oh, by the way, more children were killed. And,
really?
by the way, when my children moved in, they were targeted. And so that's what I feel was and I also, this is strange too. I developed this, after I moved into the house, I developed this really odd attraction to the art of a particular artist who concentrated on the American Indians of the French and Indian War.
Oh, interesting.
Area.
Interesting.
And I began to buy his paintings, and my house to this day it's filled with them. So I had an attraction to the very Indians who were involved in it. And I've had people say, I'm racist. I'm not racist. I'm just stating the facts.
Right.
But the facts. It happened. There were bad people. Things happened to. It was a war of terror. It was saying, if you come across the river and you try to settle here, not only are we going to kill you, we'll kill your family.
I was going to say, it sounded like they were trying to make a point, for sure.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, I mean, our time's getting limited, so I'm going to ask you this, and this is very important, I think, for anybody dealing with this type of situation, that your battle that, with this entity, demonic entity, it seems like, your faith played a very crucial part in the fight for survival. And can you tell us a little bit more about the spiritual war that you and your family went through, and how did it increase your faith and get you through that?
Well, the one question that everyone always has is, why did you stay there?
Well, that would be one. I didn't want to be rude.
Why'd you stay there? One, it was my problem. I bought the house.
Right.
And I certainly wasn't going to sell it to some unsuspecting people like it had been sold several times before.
Right.
And I know that the people that sold it to us knew about it, and I talked to the people who sold it to the previous owners, and they knew about it. So I couldn't do that. It was my problem. Two, this is my house, okay? This is my house.
Right.
I always wanted this house. I was always infatuated with this house. And guess what? I'm just not moving. Okay, you want to fight? You want to fight over it? Okay, we'll do that. That's my personality. And three, because I could say that because I do have faith. I have faith that good can overcome evil. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure exactly how that would work and what I would go through. Now, if I knew what it was going to entail, I told you I thought it was going to be a quick kind of like calling the road over.
Right.
It's over in a couple of days. No, this was like knock down, drag out. This demon was powerful. It's like the Hulk Hogan of demons.
Right.
It wasn't given. It was not. The Catholic Church used everything in its bag, and nothing was working. It was for first year. It was getting worse.
Wow.
And it became perseverance. It became once, we had this group come to the house. A year in, it was crazy. It was crazy. That's when, my wife and I were ready to get a divorce, literally. The kids two of them were in psychiatric hospitals.
Wow.
They had to quit school.
It
was bad. And that's one thing I wish I would have moved the kids out, and I didn't, because it was our house. I said, I'm not leaving our house. But by that point in time, we were ready to throw in the towel. And I don't know. What happened was the Catholic Church was looking to make a case to bring a world-renowned exorcist, Father James Labar. This guy's been on TV and so on. He's like one of the true guys, exorcists from the movie The Exorcist. He wasn't in it, but he's experienced. So they have to get the situation analyzed and verified by a somewhat professional, non-religious source that looks at it from a practical standpoint. So we contacted this group at Penn State University, a group of students. They went on to great fame after this situation, and they ended up having their own television show called Paranormal State.
Oh, yeah.
It was the first big paranormal TV show, and but they came before they were famous, and I got to hand it to them. They came, first time about 10 of them came. The second time, I think maybe only 5. The other ones wouldn't come back.
I was going to say.
Yeah, they wouldn't come back the second time. It was pretty rough. But what they did was just agitate the thing. They really, we agitated it enough that it kind of got crazy. And they came, they had talked to some mystic before they came who said that, who refused to come with them because the house was so evil, and said that the demon had a lair in the center of the house, and we had to access that lair. So one of the things they did when they first arrived, is there a void area at the center of the house? Yes, there is. Right behind that
door,
that closet.
Wow.
There's a big area in there underneath the steps that had been closed off since the house was built. We ended up cutting through the wall and, finding all kind of crazy stuff in there. And that really set the thing off. And what I learned from that, they came twice, 2 weekends, was that I learned how I could put a stick in this thing's eye the way it was doing to us, how I could make its existence in the house miserable, and what really bothered it. And once I began to learn that, it's kind of like, Rocky Balboa when he realizes, hey, when he knocks down Apollo Creed, hey, maybe I can be in this fight,
right.
And that's the way I felt. Okay, I think I got a handle on this now. And that went on though for another year, going back and forth.
That's a lot of energy.
And we were doing the stuff. You laugh and all that Catholic hocus pocus, and the incense and the candles and the rosary beads. Oh, they hate rosary beads. And I would say the rosaries several times a day. And I would battle this thing. We had to evacuate or vacate 2 bedrooms, and it would wait for me in one particular room every night, about 7 o'clock. And I would go in, and my task was to get it to leave the room. And I would sometimes go in there for several hours with it. And sometimes I would get it to leave the room, and sometimes I wouldn't. I know people listening thinks I'm mad, but read the book. I think I lay it all out in the book, and it all makes sense.
Yeah, and just in close, that like you said, that would have mentally just worn you out. I couldn't even, being with, somebody growing up with alcoholism, or with somebody at the mental state that, children of, parents that have mental issues, that's tough enough, but to have something of that caliber, affect your whole family on a daily basis, I can't imagine living through that. And, when you finally left the house, did it stop, or did this saying say, hey, I'm going with them, or was there?
What do you mean? When what?
When you left the house, What do you mean left the house? Well, when you when you left for work, or.
Oh, yeah. No, the funny thing was my daughter and her husband and young baby at the time, who lived with us on the 3rd floor.
Right.
And I moved them out because it went after my grandson. For a time, I moved them into a house a few blocks away. Mm-hmm. It kind of followed them there for a while.
Wow. See, that's why I was curious.
Go there.
Yeah.
And do a blessing at their house. But it was tied to this. It was tied here. It was tied here.
Okay.
And It finally got to the point I was so familiar with it. These things are supernatural beings, but they have limits.
Yeah.
There are rules they have to operate by. They can scratch you and bite you and push you down the steps and do superficial things to you, but they can't kill you. There's rules. There's a hierarchy. There are little poltergeist type demons, and then there are the heavyweights. So it could do all this stuff, and certainly it starts throwing blood on the walls and so on. That freaks you out, make people lose their minds. But I got so familiar with it one time after work. I'd go to work every day back when you had to wear a suit to work, and I would have starched white shirts, and I'd hang my shirt up that I'd take off on a clothes tree. And I came in the room, and there was a streak of blood on the back of the shirt. And I looked at it. And it had previously only been on the walls. I said, "What did you do that for?" Just like that. "Why did you do that?"
Yeah.
I said, "You're not impressing me." Leave my clothes alone.
Right.
I still have the shirt with the blood on it.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, I have to say this has been such a fascinating. I really was looking forward to this because I've had people, like you said, from the Conjuring House and some other people that have lived through this, and it's just fascinating to see on the other side of everything and seeing how people thrive afterwards. And I'm curious, have there been other people that have been in demonic homes that have reached out to you and said, "Hey, what can I do?" Because a lot of people don't know where to go when this happens.
For the first few years, I used to get that all the time. I mean, it got to, and I know how to deal with this stuff. I obviously did it, but to me, it's like a person who comes back from war. I do these interviews because it's part of the book. It's part of a message. I almost see it as a ministry. Yeah, but it's not something I want to be involved in.
I don't blame you.
I don't want to go back. I don't want to become like the demon chaser. Right. Or go out and, you got a demon in your house. Okay, I'll come over. No, I'll refer them to people. Or if they're in other parts of the country, there's some people I'll say here and there, but it's not something. And I did get a lot of that for the first probably 3 or 4 years after the book was published. Not so much anymore, which I'm happy.
I'm sure.
But I am very familiar with what works and what doesn't work, and I think also so many times I go out and give talks, and there'll be someone in the audience, and there are special people that understand, connected to the spiritual world, and I am more than once I've been told that there are two entities with me all the time, and they can see them. So it's kind of like, the guy who has two big bodyguards.
Right.
He can kind of walk anywhere he wants. It's not that he's real tough. I don't see them, but I know they're there. And they'll say, "Wow, you got some serious stuff around you. You got some serious protection." And just recently, 2 months ago, I was doing a book talk, and there was a terrible thunderstorm going on outside. It was really creepy. I'm in talking about this, and there's lightning and thunder, and it's like some kind of a movie. And after that, there was a young girl who came up to me very sheepishly. She was probably about 14 years old. She had a gift, and she said, "Yeah, I saw them on either side of you as you were talking."
Wow.
So, and that's happened more than once. And another thing that's happened many times. Younger people who buy this book, scare me to death. I want to read a book about a haunted house. What they find is because, there's not a whole lot of teaching about religion anymore. People don't go to church anymore.
Right.
They don't know, who Moses is or any of those stories. And they really don't know what to believe. But I think that's why the paranormal has become so popular, because inside them, they know there's something more than just the physical body. So they read my book, and I've heard a number of them, call me up, talk to me, and say, "Listen, your book has given me a whole new perspective on life, because it tells you about evil and about good and about God. And it's all real. I'm telling you, it's all real. It's the truth. I've experienced it, and no question. I'm kind of like one of the apostles who saw Jesus walk on the water. That's a different kind of faith.
Right. You guys should listen to Uncle Bob. He's telling you the truth.
That's right. I'm telling you.
All right, Bob, thank you so much. And if you guys want to go check out his website, demonofbrownsville.com, please go pick up this book. It's been out for, 10 years, but, this story is still alive. And this is an experience that Bob and his family went through. And it sounds like many other people have experienced just coming into this house or living in the house before you. And but I'm actually glad that you did find these 4 bodies in the front yard, for the fact that they can also get the respect that they deserve also, and then just people walking over them all the time.
And I mark the grave. Their names are on. I mean, their last name at least is on the grave.
Yeah, which I think is very respectful, and I think that's something that they deserve. So, but thank you, Bob, really, for coming on and starting off the Halloween season with us. And you're always welcome to come back anytime.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored and excited. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate you every Friday right here on the Club Paranormal Network. For Truth Be Told, I am Tony Sweet, and I'm here after 14 years of doing this, and I appreciate all of you for subscribing, leaving a comment, sharing this show. But until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye.